Hi there, I'm Rebecca and a really warm welcome back to my channel, PumpkinBecki. On this week's video we are getting the repotting season off to a cracking start by looking at my Picea abies forest. Let's get started. I started this forest off with plug plants back in February 2020. That's 5 years ago. Where did that time go? I have no idea. So I thought I'd rewatch the video where I planted it up, see where it started from, and then reassess it today and have a think about its future. Something that has been worrying me is that perhaps it's not been growing as vigorously as it could be. I've got a single Picea abies just on its own in a pot, and last year it put on a lot more growth than these ones did. What I've noticed particularly is that they've thickened up a lot in the 5 years. That's true, but they haven't actually thickened up that much. So I'm thinking it probably needs to go up a pot size, and actually that's the pot that it's in. This is potentially the one I want to go up into. This is 24 centimetre oval end to end. This one is 30. It's going to give those roots a bit more space to grow into, but is that enough space? Now the only other size bonsai training pot that I've got is possibly a bit overkill, which is this one. This is probably around 45 centimetres, maybe a little bit less than that. It's going to give me a lot more surface area, but actually it doesn't give me very much more depth, which is possibly what I think these trees are lacking. So I think what we'll do first is we'll get them out of this training pot, and then we will assess what root growth we've got, see whether we think it does need a little bit more room for root growth, and go from there. Now before you all start telling me this is not the right time of year to be doing this repotting on a Picea, yes, that's true, but also possibly not. The reason I want to do it now is because I think it will have limited success if I leave it as it is. It is pretty much caught in time now. It's not really doing very much. The buds haven't burst yet. They are still, they're starting to swell now, but yeah, there's no sign of green, there's no extension growth. So we are very much still in winter, just coming into early spring. We're still getting frosts, we're still getting the odd minus temperature, so you know, we're okay. We're okay. Generally speaking, things like this you would do in late summer, but I think there's good enough reasons to do it now rather than wait. We've even got roots coming out of the bottom, so I think it's safe to say that these are pretty happy trees. I've just cut all of those tie wires off, and these trees are well knotted together now, so I don't think we've got any issues there. Wow. Ooh. This was the first time I'd used this sort of pot when I planted this up. So although it's got meshed holes at the bottom, I wasn't 100% sure whether I was meant to mesh or not. So I did, and probably that was a bit pointless, but hey. Now we're going to come in and have a look at that soil surface. I am not going to complain about the sun that we've got today. Winter has been really grey and dreary. So we've been ever so lucky to be treated to almost a full week of sunshine, and people's spirits are lifting, which is good. I know winter can be very difficult for some people. Now, if you follow the teachings of Ryan Neal from Bonsai Repotting, then you will know that there isn't such a thing as repotting on a schedule. Whilst we respect that there is a proper time of year to do it, because that's for the tree's health, and in fact Norway spruce, Picea abies, as we have here, is quite sensitive to having its roots dealt with. So we do have to be quite careful. When I originally potted this, I left some of its native soil in place. I didn't bare root the plug plants. I did take some of the compost off, which was good because I found vine weevil. So you can possibly see that up here we're actually not disturbing very many roots at all. What I'm actually removing is any liverwort roots, weeds, that sort of thing. So we're not really affecting the tree's roots, they're all lower down. So I am pleased with how this has grown on over the 5 years. What I had tried to maintain was this sort of dry riverbed, pathway, animal trackway through here, which divided it into 2 uneven groups of trees, but I think because everything was so close, that did get lost fairly quickly, which is a shame, but maybe it's something I can exaggerate or reinstate when we go up a pot size, because I do think we're going to need to. What I definitely want to try and get out is those tie-down wires, which I had to cut off at the bottom. I did manage to get one out just now. I'd like to try and find the others. There's one. And as I said in that first video, once you have planted a forest, you always treat them as one entity from then on, rather than individual trees. So under normal repotting circumstances, there'd be no reason to separate trees unless you were looking to change the layout. I've been letting them grow tall in the hopes that that would help thicken up the trunks, and that may never happen. These trees are quite tightly packed and they are competing for resources, so that might mean that they never really beef up in any significant way. You can see how wet the soil is. This has been out all winter. Some of my trees have been in the greenhouse. It's an unheated greenhouse, but not all of them. This one and the single Picea abies have both been out on the benches all winter. We haven't had any snow, but we have had a lot of frost, a lot of rain, and they've both done really well despite all of that. And it's great, they've really knitted together. I'm happy about that. What I'd quite like to do is try and get as much of this decomposed soil out of the way, and I can backfill with a nice Akadama lava pumice mixture. That way the transition for these trees into that Akadama pumice lava soil is done very gently. Very gently indeed. 5 years between repottings. I haven't gone crazy trying to unknot these roots. As I said before, that's rather the point. They're supposed to be one whole thing. I am pruning back some of the really long ones and some of those that are getting a little overly thick. But you can see there's a lot of soil still left here. I am slightly trying to separate the 5 from the 3 because actually what I'd like to do is somehow increase that pathway that I had. And I think by dividing the groups here a little more, we're going to get a bit more variety. I don't want the roots bridging really high because that will start to fill in this pathway. A lot of this organicness is where I've been feeding it, where needles have dropped, that sort of thing. So I think that's probably about as far as I want and need to go. I like the idea of separating the group from this out to this, and now it's just going to depend which of those 2 pots is going to achieve that for me. So actually, this is the smaller of those 2 pots, and it gives me tons of room to do something like that in. I think the other pot is just over-horsing it completely. I think this is going to be perfect. You want to see the other pot? Okay. Too big at the moment, I believe. Is it? It definitely makes the trees look shorter. Oh, I don't know now. I think that's too much space around. I mean, that's a whole hand. There's a whole hand in there. I think that's too much extra space to suddenly give this little planting. I think we can achieve it with the other one. Does that make sense? I hope so. It's definitely a decent size bigger than this one. Because these have those grids on, I don't need to add any mesh. So that's 3 tie-down wires. 1 is on the side with the 3 trees, and then 2 on the 5. Here's my soil mix. It's 2 parts Akadama to 1 part lava, 1 part pumice. So I've created quite a mound of the soil components. because I really want to make these trees look like they are sitting on a hill. Once I start firming these in, the mound will drop and this will look less exaggerated, so I need to start with more than I think. If you've watched any of my other forest planting videos, you'll know I'm not a big fan of forests that do that. I like my trees a bit more upright, so I need to just bear that in mind as I'm working these trees in. It definitely won't hurt trying to drive some of that Akadama pumice lava into the more organic areas. Well, that took a lot longer than expected. I had to break for lunch. I don't really want to do any wiring to this at the moment. I feel like it needs to get its vigour back. And we'll see if there are any buds that I can pinch back to though. I'd like to try and reduce the vigour in the top to allow the bottom to just sort of rejuvenate. And I'm also going to try and remedy bits like this where we have 3 pieces of growth coming out of the growth tip. This piece we have, well, this is almost a bar branch. I'm going to remove the bigger of the 2. So we have a right, a left, a right, and then we come out here to the tip. And I'm just checking to see whether I can see any buds forming along these side pieces of growth because that's where I can pinch to. You do have to be really careful with spruce because they won't back bud off old growth if there's no growing tips or needles extending beyond. So you always need to make sure you leave needles. I do want to make sure I take off any downward facing branches or pieces of growth. Aha, there's a nice one. This is quite a long leggy side branch, but the nice thing is I have got a very healthy bud just there. I can prune to just above that, and that will now grow nicely in the spring. Here's another good one. We're right up in the top of the tree now. These branches are too long. I have got buds here. That's nice, they're starting to expand, but if I look down at the base, I have a little bud hiding there behind those needles, so I can trim to there. Picea abies also want to grow in whirls of growth, so you get very quick thickening at particularly the trunk, because you will just get lots of pieces all coming out from the same point. You don't want that. Two pieces here extending from one point, so it's going to start to swell. This is a weird long piece, hasn't really got any branching until we get right out here. This piece, much shorter, finer, which is good because we're near the top. So I am going to completely remove that branch. And sometimes, like this piece, even if you did leave a bud or you left needles, it will still just die back. There's nothing you can do, it's not going to produce more shoots off there, it's gone. So just trim it away. Seeing if I can reduce back any growth, just to see if I can get it back into a more spruce-like shape. The upper branches will always be shorter than the lower branches, and these trees often have that kind of, they flow down but then the tips come back out on each branch. So there we go, the forest has received its next step of development. These may not stay at these sorts of heights, I may be reducing some or all of them. They've already had the tops taken out, but that can easily happen again. What I did do was go and gather some moss and let that soak for a bit in a tray of water. And I used my little watering can adapter from my drinks bottle to really make sure the top of the Akadama was wet before I applied the moss. And I keep pressing it just to make sure it's in good contact. I won't leave this here, I'm actually going to move it down by the house where it's quite shaded, and I can also really keep an eye on keeping it watered. What I don't want is for the moss to dry out, because that is actually covering quite a lot of the roots. The extreme angles of some of those bits of planting mean that the Akadama is quite vulnerable. And as spring goes on, these will produce more buds, which means that I'll be able to push back some of the growth a little bit tighter. Hopefully some of the new ones will burst, so I'll be able to do more selective pruning. Some people might not think that's much progress for 5 years, but do you know what? For me, yes it is. Bonsai is not my sole gardening interest, so I have to spread my time and energy amongst all of that, plus all the other things I do, because I'm a crazy person. Just in case you didn't know, I have another YouTube channel created by Rebecca, which is all my crafting and a little bit of reenactment stuff as well. So hop over there and have a look. Subscribe, do all those sorts of nice things. So I'm going to go and move this into the shade, make sure it's kept well watered, and well, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to me here on YouTube. And until next time, bye.